Hello and welcome, fellow Photoshop lovers. Thanks for joining me for another episode here at Blended. Today's episode is actually going to be the first in a new mini series of compositions that I plan on creating. And basically, I've always loved the matte painting style and concept art in general, so I thought I'd give it a shot for myself here. If you follow me on Instagram at all, you know that I'm a huge fan of all things Disney, so I thought that this would be a fun genre to build off of. This new series is actually going to be based off of the 4 Walt Disney World theme parks, and what I plan on doing is taking the main icons from each of the parks and using them as my main subject, and I'm going to start off with Cinderella's castle at the Magic Kingdom Resort. Since this is basically a new style for me, it did take me a little bit longer to complete compared to my previous compositions. This one in particular is also composed of more than 30 or so different stock images as well as 3D assets, and that alone just took some time to blend in and find in the first place. So I'm going to stop with the talking. Let's just go ahead and check this out. Alright, so here we are getting started. As you can see here, I do have a sketch in the background that I'm using as a template, and I do use the word sketch very loosely, as in fact it does look like a 2-year-old drew it. Anyways, this was the first time that I actually created a little sketch for myself to use as a reference and a template to build off of. I'm trying to get in the habit of doing that, as I think it is good practice. So right now I am starting with just this mountain on the left side, and I'm reusing and recycling a lot of these textures and images throughout, so that way it looks very consistent throughout the entire mountain as I'm creating this. Just kind of using different parts of it, manipulating it to the way I want it to. Again, trying to stick true to the form that I have in that image. I will deviate a little bit from the image later on, but right now I'm trying to do the best to stick. As I mentioned earlier on in the intro here, one of the hardest parts of doing projects like this is, in fact, trying to find the images to use in the first place. There was a lot of images that went into creating this specific composition, and most of my previous compositions, the perspective is I'm looking straight at a subject. This time I'm trying something a little bit different with a higher up perspective, kind of looking down into the environment. So it was challenging trying to find just the right materials to use. That in itself, like I said, is very time consuming and is half the battle when it comes to creating some of these compositions here. Alright, so now that the mountain is done, I'm transitioning over to the castle here. And I didn't want to straight up use the castle from Magic Kingdom. I wanted to create my own arrangement and my own variation of this castle myself, and what I would imagine Cinderella's castle to look like in real life. And something I actually recommend other designers and artists to do for themselves is do a little bit of research. And that will help a lot, especially if you're going for a particular style that you want to portray. Now, I just looked up what was the castle used as kind of like a reference or a template for creating Cinderella's castle, and I found out that it was, I believe, in Germany, and I'm totally going to butcher the name of this, so please forgive me, but it looks like it's like Neuschwanstein Castle. Again, I'm almost positive I got the name wrong, but anyways, I found out that this castle was used as kind of like the main catalyst to design Cinderella's castle. So I'm using this as well as for inspiration and finding different images of this castle to just kind of pick apart and Frankenstein my own new creation using this as the subject here. So like I said, go ahead and do some research for your own personal work. I've also look at some other designers, especially for this creation. 2 particular designers in general are both Raphael Lacoste as well as Dylan Cole, were huge inspirations for creating this, and especially some decision making and some of these different elements that I'm using. Totally admire these 2 guys, and I strongly encourage you to check out some of the work, as they are both experts in the field of concept art. Alright, so something else that I typically do, especially if you watch some of my previous videos, not all artists do this, I've noticed, but particular, I just like to kind of lay everything out. I just want to make sure that the overall design is functional first before I start doing the detailed color grading. I know a lot of artists will just go in and focus on different elements and immediately start color grading, and that's totally fine. You know, if that's what you like to do, go for it. For me in particular, I know I change my mind a lot, especially once I start adding in the sky. I might feel like I want a particular mood at first, and then later decide that, ooh, maybe this might look a little bit better. So instead of having to change everything throughout, I just kind of put everything in first, make sure that it looks like it makes sense, and then I'll start going in with the detailed work with the highlights, shadows, color grading, etc. All of those different little nitpicky and you know, just time-consuming elements. All right, anyways, so I've got the castle in place. We're starting to add in the sky in the background a little bit. I saw and fell in love with this first sky image, and this is actually going to be a prime example. This first image that I used, loved it. Ultimately changed my mind because I saw something a little bit later down the road. So right now, this is just, the sky is acting as a bit of a template, and I'm working back to front here. So again, just finding some different elements and images that kind of match that same perspective. Far away, the scale is nice and small, especially with the land. That way, it also helps make this castle really stand out and a bit more striking. All right, so moving on to the foreground now. Quickly moving through this, I'm being pretty rough about it. Like I said, just trying to make sure that it makes sense first, and then I'll go in later on and do some more detailed work. And as you can see here, as I'm going on, I'm changing my original rough draft and sketch of this. I originally had the water kind of moving off to the right. Now it's moving off to the left a little bit, as I kind of like this opened up look a little bit more. Plus, I kind of like the idea of the water guiding the eye towards that castle. It looks and makes a lot more sense to me doing it this way, so I'm sticking with it. All right, so just kind of finishing up the land here. We're just about done with just, like I said, doing the mock-up of this and a very loose and rough sketch of image and photo bashing here, just to cover the areas that I want. And then I'll kind of take a step back a little bit and see what needs to be done, and then we'll refine all the areas. So I'm not going to talk over every little bit of detail here because it is in fact just very repetitive, and I'll be saying the same thing over and over again, just kind of putting the land in place, trying to stick true to the layout that I have there set forth. So I'll be back with you in just a moment as we kind of finish up with this first step. wanted to pop back in here, and I've already know I mentioned this before when we were working on the mountain. And this is just another prime example of practicing what I preach here. And as you can see, I'm just reusing a lot of the same images and textures. I know there's a lot of different tips I can give to artists, but for any young artists and designers out there, this is just another one just to really kind of cement to memory there and always keep in the back of your mind. And that's just to reuse a lot of your textures and images, because it helps kind of create a very nice balance between all of your components. It makes it look like everything belongs in one cohesive environment. And at the end of the day, that's, really what we're trying to achieve and really bring to life with our compositions here. So, like I said, a lot of different tips and tricks out there and just good pieces of information to know. This is just another one of those little things I'd like to offer to any new artists that are just starting out. All right, so we're starting to near more of the detailed parts that I'm gonna start working on. And this piece in particular, this little element here, wasn't actually part of the original plan whatsoever. I just thought as I'm going on with this would be something cool to include. Just another nice little piece of storytelling as far as this composition goes. And just wanted to create this cave-like structure for this water to enter, just to help kind of, again, tie in a little bit of visual interest with this piece. So once we add that, I'm going to move off to the foreground here, starting to spruce this area up a little bit and start implementing some deer. If you like Disney at all, this is just kind of a little ode to the movie Bambi, just to include in this piece. I thought would be a fun idea. We're now starting to move to at least what was one of the more challenging parts of this piece for me, which is the water. I went through in several different images and to ultimately decided on the one that I'm using right now to use this. And right now, just gonna duplicate this a few times and just move these all throughout the canvas to make sure that I fill up the entire lake and blend it in together as needed. This would serve as a good basis and foundation moving forward. And like I mentioned before, this was now the sky that I ultimately decided to go with. I found this, fell in love with it, and I thought this would just create a little bit more interest with the different tones, and I thought this would be fun to use for this composition, so I ultimately decided with this sky here. And now that I've got my sky in place, I usually use that to make up my decisions for the color grading of how I want the rest of this piece to go. So once I get my cloud in place and the colors that I want to use, then I'll just kind of go forward with all of the other elements throughout the piece, try to match those same tones, and that's what I'm doing right now. As you can see here, starting with the back, it is going to be a little bit more hazy, so it's not going to be clearly defined in that area, so just using a very soft round brush for that background, especially with the warmer tones. And as we move closer to the foreground here, you'll see the elements start to just get a little bit darker and darker as we get closer to the foreground. All right, so going back to these mountains or the hills in the back there, just touching that up a little bit with the sun rays, as well as adding a little bit of haze in between, just to help sell the separation and depth of field. Light in any composition is a major contributing factor. It's gonna really sell or make or break your compositions. So be mindful of how light interacts with your environment or subjects. That's kind of what I'm doing right now. Obviously, this castle is going to take up and block a lot of that direct sunlight. So you're just mindful of where it's gonna hit and putting the shadows in the right places. Do what you need to do to, again, just really sell this. On the mountains there, right by the castle on the edges, obviously you can see it's starting to be a little bit lighter than the rest. The base is going to be darker because it's going to be affected merely just by that large structure that's interfering with the light. So as before, we're just at the process right now where it's just really the detailed stuff. Adding those highlights, adding the shadows, trimming up some of those edges and refining them. I do a lot of solid color adjustment layers, especially when I'm working with the lights and color grading process. A nice little tip is you can just sample some of the colors from your sky, add in a solid color adjustment layer, just lower the opacity, and that by itself will help blend everything together. And at this time, I am just repeating a lot of those same steps over and over again, nice and boring stuff. So I will be back with you in just a moment as I start to move on to some of the other elements. So right now this land looks like it's just kind of floating there. So the sand that I'm just manually painting in is just going to help sell the effect that this is in fact an island connected to the water, bringing up that touch of realism by adding the sand. And as we get closer to the trees, just darkening up the tones to provide for the shadows that's going to be interacting close to the base there. As we move towards this cave here, just going to start adding the appropriate highlights and shadows to this. And in the center there, darkening up a little bit just because obviously the light is not going to be entering as much in there. So will be in fact darker. I thought the faces of the rocks were just a little bit too busy. So right now I'm just painting over that just to soften it up a little bit. Just a personal preference, you don't need to do it, but I just thought I liked the look of it for myself. And we're going to continue to extend that sand in the shadows just along the base there as we enter the mouth of that cave. All right, so what we did to the land on the left, we're going to apply to the land on the right, adding the highlights, shadows, and that sand on the transition of the beach there. So I'll be back with you in a second once we finish all of those elements. So I'm once more changing this water here as I wasn't really happy with what it looked like before. This new image, as you can see here, has just a little bit more definition. You can see the ripples of the water, and that's the look that I really want. And I think it brings a more overall sense of realism to this piece here. So we're just blending in some of these edges here. And as you can see, as we're getting closer to the edge there, the light is just getting a little bit lighter. And now just at this point, just providing the appropriate shadows in the correct places. And because water is extremely reflective, especially when it's more still, you're gonna see some of that reflection of the clouds and castle in there. So what I'm doing now, merged all those layers together at once, inverted the mask, and painting some of this in after I flipped the image upside down, just so you can see that sky in there. And with this new solid color layer, what I'm doing is, because you're gonna have different depths of land as we get closer to the shore there, so I'm just providing that little bit of color in there just to give us that variety of land depth. We're at the point now where I'm just doing the final touches of this piece, and we're gonna wrap this thing up and put a nice little bow on it and finish this thing off. All right, ladies and gentlemen, here we are with that final composition. My apologies in advance, just because, well, I couldn't finish this recording because my computer just couldn't handle the size of this project, so you didn't get to see me create that train element in the background. But honestly, we were pretty much at the end anyways, and you saw the majority of this process. I hope you enjoyed it. And, I'm looking forward to creating the rest of these images for this little mini series that I'm doing. And hopefully you're excited to see it as well. If you like this new style from me, want to see more of it, have a question about it, or, well, if you're frankly just tired of hearing me talk, just let me know down there in that comment section. I truly appreciate hearing from you all. If you are new to this channel, please hit that subscribe button. Please like the content. Honestly, this helps this channel grow immensely, and I truly appreciate all the help and support I can get from you guys. In the meantime, please be safe, everybody. Take care and hope to have you back again for our next video.